Madeleine's mother was very quietly spoken as she gave evidence behind a blue curtain here at Court 2 at Leicester Crown Court today in the trial of two women accused of stalking her and her family. Now, she painted a picture of being persistently messaged by one of the women, Julia Wandelt, who is 24 and from Poland, claiming that she was her missing daughter, Madeleine McCann, even leaving answer phone messages for her because she managed to get hold of her phone number.
If she's my mother, I don't want to have a contact with her, that's all, but I believe that she isn't my mother.
Okay, I understand. This all can be resolved very simply if you provide a DNA sample to Scotland Yard, for example. Are you willing to do that?
If DNA will show that my roots come from Britain, I will do this.
Well, is there any reason you wouldn't give it to Scotland Yard? If they have the McCann's DNA and they had your DNA, they could immediately determine whether or not you were related.
I would like to do it, but I tried to talk with Scotland Yard. I mean, I called them many times.
Because this is all a science question. It can be answered very simply. You don't have to compare pictures. You don't have to do anything. You just have to take their DNA and your DNA and compare it.
I tried to do it many times. As I said, I called many authorities. Nobody answered.
In any event, that's what you want. You want confirmation one way or the other.
I want to know the truth. That's all. I think that everybody wants to know the truth. Like, for example, if you will be in my situation, you would like to know the truth too.
100%.
Yes.
For sure, I'd want to know.
Nearly 2 decades after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, her mother, Kate McCann, once again appeared in a courtroom. But this time, it wasn't about new evidence in her daughter's case. It was about a woman who allegedly claimed to be Madeleine. In early October 2025, Kate McCann attended a UK court hearing where she faced Julia Wandelt, the Polish woman who, in 2023, went viral online for insisting she was Madeleine McCann. The story had spread across social media, gathering millions of views and headlines worldwide before DNA results confirmed she was not related to the McCann family. What followed was an unusual and deeply personal legal battle. The Crown Prosecution Service accused Julia Wandelt of harassment and online abuse directed at the McCanns, a case that reignited public interest and controversy around a family already living under the weight of 2 decades of public scrutiny. Inside the courtroom, BBC journalists described a tense atmosphere. Kate McCann sat behind a privacy screen as evidence was read aloud, messages, letters, and videos in which Julia had repeatedly referred to her as Mum. At one point, witnesses recalled Julia raising her voice, asking Kate, "Why are you doing this to me?" An outburst that briefly halted the proceedings. This hearing wasn't about reopening Madeleine's disappearance. It was about the lasting impact of online conspiracy, impersonation, and the boundaries between public sympathy and harassment. And for the McCanns, it marked yet another moment in which their private grief was brought back into public view. In May 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann disappeared from her family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were dining with friends at a nearby restaurant when Madeleine vanished from her bed. Despite one of the largest missing child investigations in modern history, spanning multiple countries and involving British and Portuguese authorities, her whereabouts remain unknown. The case quickly became one of the most publicized missing person stories in the world. For years, it generated ongoing media coverage, public speculation, and repeated appeals for information. Every potential sighting, claim, or theory would resurface global attention. And even more than a decade later, Madeleine's image remains symbolic of unresolved loss and unanswered questions. In early 2023, that attention returned once again, this time through social media. A 21-year-old woman from Poland named Julia Wandelt began posting online videos and photographs claiming she might be Madeleine McCann. She pointed to physical similarities, such as a spot in her eye and facial features, and said she could not remember much of her childhood. Her posts spread rapidly across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, attracting millions of views and international press coverage within days. Online followers divided quickly. Some encouraged her search for identity. Others accused her of exploiting the McCann case for attention. Amid the viral speculation, Kate and Jerry McCann did not make any public statement. However, their official representative said the family would not comment while DNA verification was pending. A DNA test was later carried out with the assistance of a private investigator. In April 2023, the results confirmed that Julia Wandelt was not Madeleine McCann and was of full Polish descent. Following the test, Julia's posts continued sporadically, referencing the McCanns and Madeleine's disappearance. She also communicated directly with people claiming to represent the family. According to UK court filings, this behavior, combined with multiple online statements and attempts to contact the McCanns, eventually led to her being charged under British harassment and communications laws. By mid-2025, the case had evolved from viral rumour into a formal criminal matter, and on October 3rd, 2025, Kate McCann appeared in court as Julia Wandelt faced charges of harassment and malicious communications, a hearing that brought the two women face to face for the first time. The hearing took place on Thursday, October 3rd, 2025 at Westminster Magistrates Court in London. Presiding over the case was District Judge Vanessa Bareitzer, known for her measured handling of high-profile hearings. It was the first time that Kate McCann and Julia Wandelt appeared in the same courtroom. The case was brought forward by the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, representing the public interest on behalf of the McCann family. Julia Wandelt faced two primary charges: harassment without violence, contrary to the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, and sending malicious communications under the Malicious Communications Act 1988. According to the prosecution summary, between February and May 2023, Julia allegedly engaged in a campaign of targeted harassment against Kate and Jerry McCann, and later their daughter Amelie. This included posting and sharing online messages and videos that directly referenced the McCanns, contacting individuals close to the family, and making statements that caused emotional distress. The prosecution described the nature of the content as persistent, intrusive, and distressing, highlighting how the McCanns, who have endured nearly 2 decades of public scrutiny, were once again drawn into a storm of online abuse and misinformation following Julia's viral identity claims. The court heard that some of Julia's posts included personal remarks addressed to Kate McCann and her family, implying they were withholding information about Madeleine's disappearance. Other communications were described as taunting or accusatory, particularly in the months after DNA results had disproved her claim. In presenting the case, the Crown's prosecutor stated that Julia's behavior had gone beyond curiosity or self-expression and had become a pattern of conduct that amounted to harassment. The McCann had received repeated unwanted contact and public allegations that caused alarm and distress, particularly to their youngest daughter, Amelie, who was drawn into the case online for the first time. Inside the courtroom, the structure of the hearing followed standard legal order. The prosecution opened with its case summary, followed by brief legal clarifications. The court then moved to witness testimony, beginning with Kate McCann, who spoke quietly but firmly about the impact of the online abuse on her family. Her statement was followed by testimony from Amelie McCann, now a young adult, who described the emotional toll of seeing her family's name repeatedly misused online. both mother and daughter were supported by legal representatives and family liaison officers present in court. Subsequent witnesses included a digital communications analyst from the Metropolitan Police, who summarized evidence collected from social media platforms and messaging services, linking the posts and accounts in question to Julia Wandelt. Each testimony was conducted under formal conditions, with the presiding judge maintaining order throughout. The hearing remained procedural and focused, a legal effort to determine whether Julia's actions constituted criminal harassment under UK law. There were no interruptions from the public gallery, and both legal teams were reminded to confine their arguments to verified evidence and conduct. When proceedings resumed, the court moved to hear testimony from Kate McCann. At her request, she gave evidence from behind a privacy screen, positioned to shield her from direct view of the defendant. This is a standard protection in cases involving sensitive or distressing subject matter. According to the BBC's court report, Kate appeared visibly emotional but composed, speaking clearly as she described her experiences since the viral spread of Julia Wandelt's claims. The court clerk confirmed her identity, and she began by outlining the first time she became aware of Julia's posts, early in February 2023. Kate explained that she had initially learned about the situation from a family friend who forwarded her social media links. The posts featured Julia claiming to be Madeleine, displaying side-by-side photos of herself and the McCanns, and asserting she shared the same distinctive eye mark as their missing daughter. She said that, at first, she and Jerry approached the matter cautiously. They did not wish to interfere publicly, hoping that authorities would quietly verify the woman's claims. But as Julia's profile gained traction online, drawing millions of views and followers, it became clear that the situation was spiraling beyond their control. Kate described how the messages intensified, with Julia repeatedly referring to her as mum and directing public comments toward the family. Some messages appeared under pseudonyms, while others were directly posted on widely shared videos. She told the court that the repeated use of the word mum was deeply unsettling, particularly after the DNA results had disproved Julia's claim. Kate stated that even after it was publicly confirmed that Julia was not Madeleine, the messages and insinuations did not stop. Instead, they evolved into more personal accusations, with posts suggesting that the McCanns were lying or withholding the truth. Kate recalled seeing a series of online statements in which Julia referred to her and Jerry by name, implying they were deceiving the public. She described the experience as relentless and cruel, adding that the posts reopened the same grief and scrutiny the family had endured since 2007. The court heard that, in the weeks following these posts, both Kate and her daughter Amelie began receiving unwanted messages from social media accounts linked to the case. Kate said this was the point at which she felt the line had been crossed. What began as a false claim had become personal harassment. In her testimony, Kate emphasized that the family had tried to stay out of the media spotlight in recent years. They had sought privacy, focusing on their children and continuing to support the ongoing investigation quietly. But Julia's online campaign, she said, forced them back into a familiar and painful cycle of public exposure. Kate also spoke about the emotional toll the experience took on her family. She described sleepless nights, renewed media intrusion, and the distress of having to explain to relatives and friends that the viral claim was false. She said that even though DNA testing had proven there was no biological connection, misinformation continued to spread online, including videos and posts implying the McCanns had silenced Julia or were hiding something. According to the prosecution summary, Kate's statement underscored how this renewed public attention reopened old trauma, especially for Amelie, who had been just 2 years old when her sister vanished. When asked by the prosecution whether she had ever communicated directly with Julia, Kate confirmed that she had not. All communication came indirectly, through media coverage or online posts. She said that her only involvement was cooperating with police after the harassment began. During the brief cross-examination, Julia's defense lawyer asked whether Kate had ever considered contacting Julia privately to clarify matters. Kate replied that it was not her place to do so. The matter had been turned over to authorities once the DNA tests ruled out any biological connection. She also clarified that she had no personal anger toward Julia, only concern about the impact her behavior had on the family's well-being. Kate's tone remained controlled, and at one point she paused to compose herself before continuing. The judge later noted for the record that Kate had maintained dignity throughout her testimony. Her evidence was accepted into the record as a clear account of the distress caused by the online campaign and its effect on her immediate family. After Kate McCann's testimony, the court heard from her daughter, Amelie McCann, one of Madeleine's younger siblings, now a young adult. It was the first time she had ever spoken publicly about the long shadow of her sister's disappearance and the renewed pain caused by false online claims. According to the BBC's account of the hearing, Amelie gave her evidence from behind a privacy screen as the court granted her the same protection as her mother. Her statement was brief but emotional. She described how the repeated social media posts by Julia Wandelt, including direct messages and public videos, had caused distress and confusion in the family home. She told the court that, for her and her twin brother Sean, the experience had reopened old wounds. For years, they had tried to live as privately as possible, aware that every anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance brought renewed media attention. But Julia's viral campaign, she said, made their family a target again. Amelie explained that she and Sean had both received messages online from strangers who believed Julia's claim. She said the story spread so widely on social media that it reached her school friends and local community, forcing the family to relive public speculation they had endured since childhood. The prosecution presented a written statement attributed to Sean McCann, who did not appear in person. His note echoed his sister's comments, emphasizing how unsettling it was to see photos, side-by-side comparisons, and videos circulating online claiming that their missing sister had been found, when they knew it wasn't true. Both siblings expressed their concern not only for their parents, but also for the ongoing harassment that intensified after Julia's identity was disproven. They noted how conspiracy accounts continued to tag the McCanns online, keeping the story alive long after the DNA tests had closed it. The family's collective testimony painted a clear picture for the court. This was not simply a case of mistaken identity. It was, in their view, a campaign that caused measurable psychological harm. The posts had revived trauma, undermined their privacy, and exposed them to renewed abuse from the public. When the McCann's legal representative addressed the judge, they added that this type of behavior, using social media to amplify falsehoods, had become one of the family's greatest challenges in recent years. The representative stressed that imposter narratives not only affected the McCann's well-being, but also distracted from the continuing investigation into what really happened to Madeleine. Through it all, Amelie remained composed, her voice steady as she affirmed that the family's goal was not revenge but closure, and to prevent anyone else from using her sister's name for attention or profit. The prosecution, led by Michael Duck KC, presented the court with what it described as a pattern of obsessive and deliberate contact directed at the McCann family. According to the BBC's transcript of proceedings, Crown Prosecutor Michael Duck KC told the jury that Julia Wandelt's behavior went beyond mistaken identity. It was, in his words, a sustained campaign of harassment which caused significant alarm and distress. The court heard how Julia had first reached out to Kate McCann through social media in early 2023, introducing herself as a young Polish woman who believed she was Madeleine. At first, her tone was pleading and confused, but after the McCanns sought official verification through DNA testing, which later confirmed no genetic link, Julia's messages reportedly intensified instead of stopping. Mr. Duck read aloud from several of those messages. Some were short and direct. "Mum, why won't you speak to me? I know you're hiding something. Please tell me the truth." Others were longer, written in what the prosecution called open letters and posted publicly on social platforms. In one message, Julia wrote, "I feel you are my real mother. I can see it in our eyes." The prosecution submitted these digital messages and online posts as evidence, showing that many were published after the DNA results had been released, proving Julia was not Madeleine McCann. According to the prosecution, even after being told by authorities to cease contact, Julia continued to tag the McCanns in posts, upload videos referencing Madeleine's disappearance, and share private details about the family. The court also heard from two witnesses, Ellie and Linda McQueen, who had interacted with Julia online and in person. They testified that she spoke frequently about the McCann family and appeared fixated on the idea that she was Madeleine. One of them described her posts as disturbing and persistent, while the other recalled that Julia didn't seem able to separate fantasy from reality. Prosecutor Michael Duck, KC, emphasized that the evidence was not about one or two messages, but a consistent pattern that spanned months. He said Julia's conduct included sending multiple unsolicited messages to Kate McCann through private accounts, posting public accusations that implied the McCanns were hiding her true identity, persistently addressing Kate as "Mum" even after police involvement. This was not confusion, the prosecution said. It was fixation, one that caused tangible distress to a family already marked by trauma. The jury was shown a selection of Julia's social media uploads, which prosecutors said had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Some of those clips featured emotional appeals, while others contained conspiratorial claims suggesting the McCanns had replaced her. Mr. Duck told the court that Kate McCann had attempted to ignore the posts at first, hoping they would fade, but as the volume increased and the tone turned accusatory, she began to fear for her safety and that of her children. The prosecution concluded its evidence by stating that Julia's behavior met the legal definition of harassment under the UK's Protection from Harassment Act. Her repeated contact, public dissemination of false claims, and disregard for prior warnings showed intent to cause distress, Mr. Duck said. The court was then reminded that the matter before them was not about Madeleine's disappearance itself, but about the emotional and psychological harm caused to her surviving family by someone exploiting that case for attention. During the proceedings, Julia Wandelt sat in the defendant's box, appearing at times visibly anxious and emotional. As the BBC noted, her demeanor shifted repeatedly, alternating between silence, visible agitation, and moments of defiance when her behavior was addressed by the judge. At one point during the hearing, Julia interrupted proceedings, shouting toward the McCann side of the courtroom. According to reports, she yelled, "Why are you doing this to me?" and appeared distressed as court officers instructed her to remain calm. The judge called for order before allowing the prosecution to continue its questioning. The BBC's account described the moment as tense but controlled. Court officials were said to have maintained a measured atmosphere despite the emotional outburst. Julia's legal representative, whose arguments were summarized in the BBC's coverage, stated that his client never intended to cause harm. He told the court that Julia genuinely believed she could be Madeleine McCann and that her online actions stemmed from confusion, not malice. The defense acknowledged the distress caused to the McCanns, but argued that the conduct should be viewed in light of Julia's psychological condition. The court heard that she had previously sought mental health support and that her belief of being Madeleine developed through what her lawyer described as a misguided search for identity. She did not act out of cruelty, her lawyer told the court. She acted from a place of belief, one that was later disproven, but to her, at the time, felt real. Throughout the hearing, Julia occasionally reacted audibly when evidence was read aloud, particularly when the prosecutor referenced her "Dear Mum" letters and social media posts. court reporters described her as whispering responses under her breath, at times appearing to address Kate McCann directly, though her words were not formally recorded. When cross-examined about her continued posting after the DNA results were public, Julia's defense maintained that she was not attempting to harass anyone, but rather seeking clarity and closure. Her lawyer said that Julia had become overwhelmed by the global attention her claim received in 2023, and that she was unprepared for the scale of media reaction. The defense further stated that Julia had been subjected to online harassment herself following the exposure of her claim, and argued that this context should be considered when assessing her actions. This is a young woman who was consumed by the very online storm she helped create, her lawyer told the court. What began as a plea for truth spiraled into something she could no longer control. As proceedings continued, the judge intervened more than once to remind Julia to remain silent while others were speaking. Despite her earlier interruptions, she later sat quietly as further evidence was reviewed. The BBC reported that, toward the close of the day's hearing, Julia appeared visibly upset and wiped tears from her eyes while court officers spoke briefly to her before adjourning. No formal verdict was delivered at that stage of the hearing, as proceedings were expected to continue. However, by the end of the session, both prosecution and defense had presented sharply contrasting interpretations, the Crown alleging deliberate emotional harm, and the defense insisting on mistaken belief and mental distress. The court adjourned shortly after, with instructions for further administrative review before the next appearance. As the court reached the final part of the hearing, the presiding judge addressed both sides in measured terms. According to BBC's report, the judge acknowledged the deeply emotional nature of the case, noting that the incident involved not only legal questions of harassment, but also real human distress on both sides. The judge thanked the McCann family for their composure during proceedings, particularly Kate McCann and her daughter Amelie, who had given evidence earlier in the day. He also reminded the gallery that public interest in the case could not override courtroom decorum or fairness to the accused. This is a highly sensitive matter, the judge said. It requires the same restraint and respect afforded to any person standing before the court. In addressing Julia Wandelt, the judge commented on her behavior during the hearing, including her earlier interruptions. He cautioned her about the seriousness of the charges and reminded her that the court expected full cooperation and compliance with future proceedings. "You must understand," he said, "that these are not abstract allegations. They concern real people who have suffered real emotional impact." The court then outlined the next procedural step, the conclusion of evidence submissions and the preparation of sentencing or final determination at a later date. The decision was reserved, meaning no final judgment or penalty was announced at this hearing. The BBC noted that the judge confirmed both the prosecution and defense would be notified of the forthcoming ruling once the written findings were completed. Until that time, all parties were reminded that public commentary should be limited to avoid interference with the court's process. Before adjourning, the judge made a broader statement regarding online behavior and impersonation cases, an issue that continues to grow in prominence across the UK and Europe. He acknowledged that while technology has made it easier to connect people globally, it has also blurred boundaries between belief, identity, and deception. The law, he remarked, is still evolving to meet the challenges posed by the digital age, where words, images, and identities can travel far faster than truth itself. He further emphasized that false identity claims, even when born from confusion rather than deliberate intent, could inflict measurable psychological harm. In such cases, the court's role, he said, was to balance compassion with accountability. After the closing statements, the McCanns exited the courtroom quietly, accompanied by legal representatives and family supporters. The BBC observed that Kate McCann did not speak to the press as she left, though reporters noted her expression as one of visible relief and exhaustion. Julia Wandelt remained seated briefly before being escorted from the courtroom by security officers. Her lawyer declined to give an extended comment, saying only that the case is ongoing and our client continues to cooperate. As the hearing concluded, the court clerk announced the next procedural date, a formal judgment expected within weeks. The proceedings adjourned shortly after midday. In summary, no verdict was delivered at this stage, but the session marked the most direct confrontation yet between the McCann family and the woman whose false identity claim reignited global headlines. The case, the BBC noted, now stands as an example of the complex intersection between digital misinformation, personal trauma, and the enduring shadow of one of the world's most famous missing child investigations. This hearing was not about solving the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. It was about something else, a quiet, painful reminder of how the case continues to ripple through people's lives nearly 2 decades later. For Kate and Jerry McCann, every court appearance, every headline, and every claim inevitably reopens the same wound. The night their daughter vanished from a holiday apartment in Portugal in May 2007, the world remembers the disappearance, but what's less visible is the ongoing aftermath, the emotional, legal, and digital chaos that continues to orbit around the family. The court's proceedings in this case made something clear. The Madeleine McCann story has never truly ended. It has evolved from physical searches and police inquiries to a new kind of investigation happening online. Social media has given anyone the power to publish accusations, or in this case, even false identities. Julia Wandelt's viral claim in 2023, saying she might be Madeleine, spread across platforms within hours. Millions followed it, shared it, debated it, and when DNA results proved otherwise, the digital noise didn't stop. It simply shifted to new claims, new angles, and more speculation. This case is not unique in the modern age. Across the internet, missing persons cases, especially high-profile ones, often attract people who insert themselves into the narrative, some out of genuine belief, others for attention. For the McCanns, the result has been years of defending themselves, not just from police suspicion or media scrutiny. In this sense, this latest hearing wasn't just about one woman's actions. It reflected a broader problem: how the lines between truth, obsession, and public curiosity have blurred. The court's measured tone and the BBC's factual reporting reinforced a point often forgotten amid the noise, that behind every headline there are still human beings navigating an ordeal that never truly ended. Kate McCann's quiet presence in court, separated by a privacy screen, symbolized that. Not confrontation, not closure, but endurance. And as the judge noted, these cases are becoming more common. People impersonating victims, inventing links, or reigniting old traumas online. It raises a difficult question for society. How do you balance free speech with the right not to be re-traumatized? As the hearing closed and both sides left the courtroom, one truth remained. This was not a story about answers, but about limits. The limits of what families can bear. The limits of what the law can regulate. Nearly 20 years on, Madeleine McCann's disappearance continues to echo. But the story now tells us as much about our digital world as it does about that single night in Portugal. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more factual, case-based analyses. And in the comments, let's discuss this. Has online attention helped the search for truth in cases like Madeleine McCann's, or has it blurred the line between justice and obsession?